హాయ్ హలో వెల్కమ్ టు ఈగిల్ మీడియా వర్క్స్ యూర్ వాచింగ్ ఈగిల్ స్పోర్ట్స్ అండ్ నాతో ఇప్పుడు ఒక స్పెషల్ గెస్ట్ ఉన్నారు. స్పోర్ట్స్ జర్నలిజంలో వన్ ఆఫ్ ద సీనియర్ మోస్ట్ స్పోర్ట్స్ జర్నలిస్ట్ అండ్ అలాగే ఎంఎల్ జయసింహ గారి గురించి ఒక పుస్తకం రాయడం జరిగింది, బయోగ్రఫీ రాయడం జరిగింది, మై వే అని చెప్పేసి. అండ్ దాని ఫోర్వర్డ్ అనేది సునీల్ గవాస్కర్ గారు రాశారు. దీనికి ఆ పుస్తకం గురించి అండ్ అలాగే స్పోర్ట్స్ గురించి, ఇండియన్ క్రికెట్ టీం గురించి, కామెంటరీ గురించి ఆయనతో మాట్లాడదాం. First of all, thank you so much, Joseph sir, for allowing us this time to speak to you.
My pleasure, Mr. Sandeep. Thank you so much.
And this book, My Way, has been one of the best books that I've ever read on sports. And congratulations and thank you so much actually for writing and letting all of our generation know about Jaisimha sir and also cricket.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sandeep. Actually, if you see, they say classics are evergreen, you know. So M.L. Jaisimha, although he died 20 years ago and he made his debut about 60 years ago in Lords in 1959, he's still a favorite. He is Sunil Gavaskar's favorite. He is Satya Nadala's favorite. He's VVS Lakshman's favorite. And he has had an influence on a whole generation of cricketers. Not one generation, several generations. Because of his knowledge of cricket. And above all, he was a fabulous human being. So if you see, particularly in the media, he was a media darling. Everybody liked him. And his friendships have been long-lasting, which have lasted several decades. And among his friends, if you see, you know, the who's who of international cricket, Gary Sobers was his very close friend. Whenever he was in Hyderabad, he would visit him. And so also Imran Khan and Sarfraz Nawaz and lot of international cricketers were very, very close and friendly with him, as much as his own teammates were very fond of him.
Right. So when did you actually come up with this thought of writing a biography on Jaisimha sir?
Actually, when he passed away in 99, his widow had asked me to write the biography. And I needed permission because I was working with the Hindu at that time. And our sports editor, late Mr. S. Krishnan, was extremely supportive, very, very encouraging. And here at Hyderabad, my ex-boss, Mr. Abhijit Sengupta, was very, very, very supportive, extremely supportive, and very encouraging too. And it all started with the research I did with the laptop. At that time, you know, the laptops are not as common as you see them today. And the office laptop was at my disposal, and I visited several places to research for the book. I went to Bombay, I met Sunil Gavaskar, I met Salim Durrani, I met Tanuja, the actress, and then I went to Calcutta, I went to Delhi, I met Mansur Ali Khan of Pataudi, and I also met several players in Tamil Nadu and elsewhere. So some research went into it, but the actual writing would not have taken more than about 6 months. But the difficulty was in finding somebody to publish the book and to print the book, and there I'm indebted to VVS Lakshman. His appeal to TVS Motor Company, resulted in sponsorship to the tune of 2.2 lakhs, and that's how the book came in print. There was a lot of support from various people, including Harsha Bogle, and I'm very, very grateful to them for their support.
Right, sir. If you look at Jaisimha sir and you have written the biography, and when we read this book, as youngsters and as people, of this generation who love cricket, this book is something that gives them an instant high when they read about Jaisimha sir. So how did you manage to connect that generation star to this generation?
In English there's a term, it's not cricket. Cricket is all about fair play, and it's a very competitive sport, and everybody likes to win. Jaisimha was also like that. But nobody would say he was not a gentleman. He was always a gentleman, very, very gracious, very. There is a school of thought. Some of his teammates would say that he was a bad loser. He was like an Australian. But what I have noticed is he had very good rapport with players of other teams. Invariably, when teams from other countries visited Hyderabad, there used to be a party in his house. West Indians particularly, with whom he had very, very close connect. He was extremely close to Gary Sobers. And so would he get away with all kinds of jokes about all the West Indian players, especially the fast bowlers, who had very short tempers. And the pioneer of the fast bowling machine that the West Indies became was Roy Gilchrist, who Jaisimha persuaded to play for Hyderabad in the Ranji Trophy and for South Zone in Dulip Trophy. And that was an experiment the BCCI had taken in 1963. And Jaisimha was very much an integral part of it. And Roy Gilchrist had an extremely short temper. He was a very short-tempered man and short fuse rather. And Jaisimha was the only man who could, control him and with his tact and with his shrewd man management.
Right. And again, when you talk about this book, when you talk about Jaisimha sir, when you talk about all the other cricketers that have come after Mr. Jaisimha, you see everybody has that regard for him, has that respect for him, and everybody sees him as a hero. And now, if you look at this generation of cricketers and this generation of cricketing fans, so what kind of parallels can you draw, or what kind of inspiration do you think all the cricket lovers can draw in from Jaisimha's story?
The book actually aims to show what a good human being he was. For him, money was not paramount. In many cases, I have seen him when I was reporting the Ranji Trophy matches or Dulip Trophy matches in Hyderabad. I would notice that his pockets are always empty. And that was not because he didn't have the money. He was from an extremely, very, very wealthy background. His father had built the Begumpet airport. His father had built the Tungabhadra Dam. And his father had commissioned a 5,000 megawatt power plant on the shore of Hussain Sagar. So, his father was a distributor for Westinghouse, one of the biggest refrigeration companies in the world. But despite all that, when he passed away, most of the ground staff in HCA were weeping. And, some of them said when the HCA would give him his fees in cash those days, he would distribute the cash there and then in the ground staff. He would just give away the money, and he was a prince in that way. He was very lavish as a host and very generous. Money, he was not money-driven like so many sportsmen are nowadays. So he can be a great example to present-day sportsmen, who chase success so relentlessly and, in the process become very mercenary and very money-driven. So he's actually a shining example of sports in all its purity. You play sports for the love of sports, for the fun, or the character building sports does for various people.
Right, sir. Nowadays, if you look, there are a lot of media. You have Instagram, you have social media, you have Facebook, you have TV, you have papers, and all of those things. But during those kind of days, there was only newspaper or there was radio. At that point of time and this point of time, there is a lot of difference. Now people actually talk about captaining styles and all of those things. Dada had a different style, Dhoni has a different style, Virat has a different style. But then if you look at Jaisimha's cricketing journey, he also had a style. So what do you talk about that style, and what have you written in this book?
He had actually a role model in terms of his cricket, especially in terms of style, and that was Australia's Keith Miller. He followed or he admired him so much that he would wear his sweater over his left shoulder. He would just tip it over his left shoulder and walk like Keith Miller, or rather walk more like the Hollywood star Robert Mitchum, and some of his friends would make fun of him saying Bob Mitchum. And he had a very peculiar walk. Krishnamachari Srikanth has imitated it on one show in Doordarshan, how Jaisimha took, life with a style all his own. And, he was very laid back, but an extremely shrewd observer of the game. I don't think even today you will find somebody with that kind of cricketing acumen. Some of these people now who are pundits on TV who talk about cricket and tactics, they have picked up so much from him, and they don't have the decency to give him the credit that is due to him. They have, I know certain people, I don't want to name them, who would say, how do you sort out Kalicharan, how do you sort out Lloyd? And Jaisimha would very generously, without a second thought, just tell them, this is how you do it. This is the kind of field you set for him. And, he plays this stroke, this is his pet stroke, and this is how you can get him out, how to snare him to his dismissal, and that kind of thing only Jaisimha could give, and which I don't think maybe for Gavaskar can do that, but I'm not sure about anybody else, any of the contemporary cricketers who can read a game so closely as Jaisimha did. In fact, to just give you one example of his cricketing genius, he's the only man who predicted that the 1986 test in Chennai would become a tie. The only man, nobody, none of the commentators from all over the world could say that. from Australia, from England, or from India. Nobody could predict that that test was going to end in a tie. Jaisimha is the only man who said that. And he said that much before the game was over.
And then again, Sunil Gavaskar has written the foreword for this book. So, how did you talk to him, and how was he? Was he gracious, and how did he react to you when you went and spoke to him and said that you were going to write a biography about Jaisimha, sir?
I had all kinds of misconceptions about Sunil Gavaskar. I was under the impression that he is a typical Mumbai man and very business-like and stuff. But I happened to get his email ID from one of Jaisimha's very close friends, who's no more, late Chalasani Ravindra Prasad, who used to be known as Bobji. And I just sent Mr. Gavaskar a mail, and believe it or not, he promptly replied. And he said, "For Jaisimha, I'm willing to walk through a minefield." That was the line he used. Sadly, a lot of that correspondence I had with him is lost because I was communicating with him on my official Hindu email ID. And now that I'm no more with Hindu, I don't have access to that email anymore. And so I, said, "I want to discuss Jaisimha with you, and can you please give me a time?" And he was, almost every week, and he's an extremely busy man. He was doing commentary all over the place, and he was traveling so much. But then he's such a fantastic time manager. I think that is the key to his success. He said initially that he would be going to Calcutta to see his son Rohan, and then he suggested, you come to Chennai when the test match is happening. I'm talking about the 2001 series, right, Australia-India series, where Lakshman had got his 281. And I went to the hotel in Chennai where he was staying, and he had mailed me a time. He said I should be there at 7:30. But I was so conscious that I should not be delayed. I was there at 7:10 itself. And I called his room from the lobby phone, and I said, "See, I'm here, sir." So he said, "I thought I told you 7:30. I said, no, I'm just telling you, sir, I'm already here in the lobby. This is just to inform you. Whenever you're ready, I will come up." Then he said, "Okay, you give me 5 minutes, and then you come up." So I went up, and Gavaskar incidentally has a management company called Professional Management Group, and they were replaying the tide test of 1986.
Oh, yeah.
So it was, I think, the 25th anniversary of that test, 2001. And, I saw all those past greats, Alan Border and Bruce Reed and all those players, along with the Indian team. And believe it or not, once Gavaskar started speaking about Jaisimha, there was no stopping him. He was giving me such wonderful stories about him. I recorded the whole conversation, and it reached a stage that it was a sit-down dinner for both the teams, the Indian and Australian teams of 1986. And Gavaskar was late, and he is incidentally the host. And he kept talking, and then I felt very awkward, and, the calls were coming on his phone every now and then I said, "Sir, it's very unfair that I keep you waiting. I think all of them are waiting for you. I will not keep you further. You please go ahead, and you please let me know. If you have more to share, just drop me a line, and I'll come and see you wherever you think it's possible." But I think he had given me almost everything he remembered of him, and he was extremely calm and composed when he was relating all those episodes about him. And I must also say, he mentioned me thrice in his column. He writes a column which is very popular all over the world, especially among the cricketing community. And there he mentioned me by name 3 times. And he said he's writing this book about Jaisimha and so on. So that's how people got to know. I was actually keeping it a secret till then. But my friends and colleagues in the office got to know after they read the column that I'm working on Jaisimha's biography.
Right. So now, sir, if you look at this generation and also look at how cricketing is reported, and now you see vernacular commentary coming in and taking it. So how do you look at this? How good is vernacular commentary, and what do you think about it? How it is good for the sport and also for the viewers?
Vernacular commentary is very good for making a sport even more popular. Like we have my good friend, Mr. Sudhir Mahavadi, who's very fluent with not just the languages. He's equally fluent with English, with Telugu and Hindi. But being a sports journalist himself, he knows the sports, he knows the rules, he knows the jargon, he knows the terminology, and the peculiarity of each sport. So he's able to connect to a very large audience because of his knowledge of sports. But we see a very unhealthy trend of people from not non-sporting backgrounds coming into journalism or commentary who probably don't even know the rules properly or who don't know the peculiarities of various games, because each game has its own character, each game has its own, let's say, eccentricities. So in that way, it needs a sports journalist to understand a specific sport, or to relate to a certain area or rule of a sport. And in that way, sports journalists would be actually better to do commentary in sports. But sadly, in vernacular journalism, we notice that many people who have no background in sports are entering the field, and over time they will be exposed, I'm sure. But whereas vernacular commentary is good for the sport. Now, for example, the FIFA World Cup that we did for Sony TVs, Sudhir and myself, it reached a large audience in Andhra and Hyderabad because football does have a following. And all said and done, the FIFA World Cup is the biggest televised event in the world. I don't think there is a bigger event, whether it is US presidential elections or UK parliamentary elections or Indian parliamentary elections or whatever. I don't think, they say, more than half the planet watches the FIFA World Cup. The Cricket World Cup is very small in front of that. And so, it's mostly the Indian diaspora, or the few handful of countries that belong to the Commonwealth that follow cricket. Even big audiences like China don't follow cricket, whereas football is followed all over the world. And when you have the game in your own language, you're able to understand, you're able to identify the players. If a commentator is able to identify the players correctly for you, then half the job is done for the viewer. And it's, listening to or following a sport in your own language has its own flavor. It has its own taste. So vernacular commentary, like Dr. Krishna was saying a little while ago, football commentary in particular has its own flavor, and it resonates with the Spanish audience so much, or with the Italian audience so much, and with the English audience so much, because the commentators are able to convey the feel of the game to them. But in vernacular journalism in India particularly, we have severe limitations on terminology. For example, in Telugu commentary, we won't have the equivalent of offside, or a false nine, or attacking midfielder, or holding midfielder, these terms which are peculiar to football. So we end up using a lot of English terminology, and essentially, the knowledge of sports is paramount when commentary in sports has to be effective.
Right, so now, if I ask you to comment on the trends and also the job opportunities for sports journalists, there's a lot of courses that are being offered in journalism and in sports journalism. Is there a career for them?
I would say the print medium is dying all over the world. So the new media, the electronic media, I think there's still a lot of scope. And essentially, it is mandatory, not essentially, that sports journalists or commentators do their homework. They know the rules, they know the players, they know the jargon, the terminology, before they venture into any sport. Very often, I have seen in my career with the Hindu, I have seen journalists coming from, or rather contributors coming from various newspapers who don't know even how to write a scoreboard in cricket, which is supposed to be the religion in India. But it becomes even more difficult with sports like boxing or golf or aquatics, or horse riding or show jumping. There are so many sports which have terminology very peculiar to their respective disciplines, or athletics. So it is as a career, it can be very rewarding, very satisfying, because there is never a dull moment in sports. And the electronic and new age media, yes, there are a lot of opportunities, provided aspirants do their homework and go prepared, rather than simply go and ask, how do you feel after winning this, or ask the same old very staple questions which anybody will ask.
And one more thing, what all of the sports journalists encounter is how much of sport you have played. When somebody wants to talk about cricket, then the first question is how much of cricket you have played. At what level of cricket were you there? So, how is this a hindrance, or how do you look at this?
Actually, what we have noticed in our careers in commentary and the print medium is that most sportsmen cannot articulate or explain a game uh, spontaneously and quickly as the audience wanted. You have very few, a handful of very competent commentators like Sunil Gavaskar or Harsha Bogle, but okay, Harsha Bogle has played only league level cricket in Hyderabad, maybe, if I'm not wrong. But he's able to explain cricket very well because he knows the sport so much and his reading on the sport is so much. Gavaskar is, of course, a blend of both. He has read so much, and plus, of course, he was a former player and he understands the game very well. I have come across former cricketers who have played, Ranji Trophy and Dulup Trophy and nearly went on to play for India. One particular player, I don't want to name him, he said, I cannot even write a paragraph to describe one game, he said. A day's play, he cannot, because he doesn't have the training or the aptitude of, say, a sports journalist. All said and done, the question you asked about sports journalism is, I think sports journalists need to be qualified to some extent. If they have not been players themselves, they need to read and understand the sport, follow the sport. Christopher Martin Jenkins is perhaps one of the best commentators in cricket ever. But he used to play only village level cricket. And, there were the world's best cricketers who would respect him for his views because of his understanding of the sport and because of the simplicity with which he described a day's game. And his overall competence is beyond question. Whereas it is not a given that a good cricketer will necessarily be a good commentator. Right. It is, you must have noticed it too, Mr. Sandeep, in your interactions with Kings 11 Punjab. Many of them, in fact, most of the cricketers I have come across have very little to talk about apart from sports. I came across one interesting person in Sawa Karim, who's now, I think, the BCCI's CEO or something. So he is a very well-read man, and he used to read a lot of classics. So he could talk about things other than cricket. Whereas cricketers, by and large, see Harsha Bogle, for example, he used to do even a travel show. He used to travel to Kerala and these exotic places in South India and talk about it. So it shows that, he can talk on management, he can talk on so many subjects apart from cricket. So that shows his versatility. I'm not sure many cricketers can do that.
And finally, sir, to our audience and our subscribers, what do you have to say about your book? Because I've been asking what others have said about your book, but then again, if I ask you to comment on your book, which you have written about Jaisimha, My Way, what would you say?
I would say, don't expect too much of cricket in the book, in the sense, we won't talk too much about Jaisimha's batting technique or his bowling speed and so on and so forth. My purpose in writing that book was to show what a good human being he was, more than anything else. I think above all, you need to be a good human being to be a good sportsman. So he epitomized everything nice about sports and cricket, and he was a thorough gentleman to that extent. And so it is more about him as a person than as a cricketer. It's not that I have not discussed his cricket. I have discussed a lot of his cricket, a lot of his tactics. But I have also, targeted an audience which, say for example, women. Women found him very attractive. So, as you know, most women don't follow cricket so closely or may not understand a lot of terminology from cricket. But I'm sure they're able to understand what kind of a good human being he was. If they read this book, they will understand that. And I am also, by God's grace, it is now among the top dozen cricket ebooks of all time. It is at number 8 right now, and I'm hoping it will go further. And this book you can read, especially people from Hyderabad and from India as a whole, or the cricketing world. He was respected all over. In fact, when he passed away, there were obituaries for him in the Times of London, in the Independent, and in the Guardian. So it shows, he was a universally popular figure, well loved, not just in his homeland, but all over the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for giving us this time. And I wish the book goes further up the ladder and somehow within a few days' time it finds itself in the top 2 or 3 positions. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you so much.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you, Mr. Sandhu.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Like and subscribe Eagle Media Works.